is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Family Fridays here on the Gravity Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Chris. Thank you for choosing to tune in today. Hey, folks, I'm excited about us continuing this conversation. How do we stay grounded in a world full of noise and chaos? And probably even more so, I'm excited about this edition of Family Fridays. Bringing family members on the show and giving them the space to talk about what is it like being a family member of a first responder. I think there's a lot of power in these stories. I think it's going to do two different things. One, I think for the first responder families, the spouses and kids, I think it's going to give you comfort knowing that you're not in this alone. There's a lot of other spouses and family members that are out there living a very similar experience. And for us as the first responders, I think it's going to give us perspective. Hearing from other spouses and realizing, wow, is my spouse going through some of these similar things? I need to carve out some time to go connect with my spouse or with my kids to see what is this experience like for them. The guest on the show today is Diane Hwang. Diane is a law enforcement officer's wife. She's a mother. She leads a nonprofit called the Blue Hero Project. You're going to be hearing great things about what they're doing here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm just excited for you to hear about her perspectives. But before we do that, folks, I wanted to talk about something that Jaimie and I are doing right now, a little bit different. We're working with different organizations to host date nights for first responder families, an opportunity for first responders to come together in a safe place to share a meal with each other and with their spouses or significant others. And Jaimie and I bring our story to you. What has this PTSD experience been like for us? What is it like for us as a first responder family? And what have we learned from it? And then what skills can we implement on a daily and weekly basis for us to show up better as moms and dads, husbands and wives, whatever roles you play? We want to show up as our best self. So we're doing this at a couple different law enforcement agencies and regions. If you want to learn more about it, look down in the show notes for our website or email address. Shoot us an email. We'd love to come to your area and be part of a date night for your first responder family. With that, folks, let's get into this interview with Diane Hwang. Diane Hwang, welcome to the Gravity Podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now, we recently met at a Stronger Families fundraising gala, right? Super
Yes.
excited to meet you and your husband, Davin, and just get to know you guys a little bit and hear more. Even though I was already following you guys on socials, it was good for me to hear a little bit more about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I loved meeting you guys. I actually first heard about you in Cannon Beach, of all places,
Gotta be
Cannon Beach,
kidding.
Oregon. We were visiting with Cannon Beach PD and they were talking about you guys. And that was the first time I heard your guys' names.
Yeah.
And then over the last, gosh, probably a year, I've just heard your names here and there. So it was awesome to finally meet you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate those folks at Cannon Beach PD. That's our home away from home. So we like that they keep that place a safe haven for us. So
They're amazing.
yeah. Hey, if you don't mind, Dan, for folks that don't know you already, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, my name's Diane and I am a police wife. My husband works for a city agency here in outside of Seattle, and so Seattle area. And I was born and raised in this area, born and raised right outside of Seattle, still live outside of Seattle. And so I've lived here my whole life. And my husband and I have been married. We're coming up on 9 years, actually next month. We're going
Awesome.
to Cannon Beach to celebrate our anniversary. Best spot. Super excited. But yeah, our marriage and relationship in relation to law enforcement is different in that when we met, he thought he was going into full-time ministry. And that was where we saw our life going. He would work for a church and be a pastor of some sort. And along the way, he ended up in law enforcement. So he's been in law enforcement for 5.5 years. So we had a good amount of time before, early on in our marriage, that he was not in law enforcement. It wasn't even on our mind. Um, and now here we are, 5.5 years in, and it's really been just such a gift to us and to our family to be a part of this community. And we have two kids, young kids, so they're 7 and 5. And I homeschool the kids, and that's been a lot of fun and very challenging.
It is.
I grew very challenging. I grew up in public school
Yeah.
my whole life and never really pictured myself homeschooling, and had kids. And, it's kind of like with Dovin's career in law enforcement, like we have one plan, and then we really feel like God shifts us in a different direction. And so that was homeschooling for us. So we're on year 2 of doing that. And super grateful for our department. My husband's on the peer support team, and I serve alongside some other wives to really just started getting a spousal support, family support group off the ground
Right.
at our agency. So that's been a lot of trial and error and hard work, and just figuring out the best way that we can serve the families at our department. And I also work part-time at our church, and that's been a new thing over the last year and has been just a lot of fun. And yeah, just a joy. I serve as the welcome lead. So I love welcoming people and creating space for people to feel at home. And so that's been a great fit for me as well. And then, yeah, we also have a nonprofit called Blue Hero Project, and started in 2021. And we visit law enforcement agencies kind of all across the state of Washington, primarily Western Washington, and then down to Portland, and bring snacks and drinks as just a tangible way to show support to officers. And we bring Bibles, and recently started hosting law enforcement family events with the mounted, actually behind me, mounted patrol unit over at Seattle.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a little bit of everything.
You sound like you have a lot of free time where you're watching soaps and eating bonbons.
Yeah, lots
Lots of
lots of
sarcasm there.
free time.
Lots of sarcasm. And I get a kick because we did the homeschool thing with our kids for a few years.
Okay.
And the people's perception of homeschooling is, that our kids are playing in the dirt and, doing arts and crafts time with like macaroni and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, it's not quite like that. It's 2023. There's actually a lot of great curriculum out there that helps us as parents to come alongside our kids and educate them. And it was fulfilling. What we learned with our number two was that it wasn't going to work with her. Number
Yeah.
one thrived in that environment. Our number two would just shut down as soon as we tried teaching
Mm,
this. And it was just who she was. She needed us to be mom and dad, and she needed teachers that were going to be teachers. And uh, I love the fact that you and Davin have learned that in life, God is going to move you. You have an idea of the direction you're going. We're going to go into the full-time ministry. This is going to be wonderful. My husband's going to be a pastor, and I'm going to be a pastor's wife, and all of this really strong faith, and woo, and we're perfect. And then God says, yeah, actually, I need you to go over here. I need you to be a police officer, and you're still going to be full-time ministry. It's just that I'm going to route your paycheck through a municipal police department instead of a church, right?
yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things you can never get too locked down in one thing, and have to live very open-handed. And I think that's what we've learned across the board. Like even with homeschooling, like it's one of those things, we're open-handed, and every year we're going to reevaluate and see if it's still a good fit. And law enforcement, like even lifting that up and open-handed and being, we'll serve in this capacity for as long as we're called to serve in this capacity.
Yeah.
um but I think that, a lot of people had asked me when Davin started in law enforcement, like, oh, you didn't plan on this when you married him, you didn't think you were marrying, someone that was going to be in law enforcement. And I think there's yes, there's kind of like, oh, okay, this isn't what I thought. But I also feel like when you step out in obedience and walk the path that God's calling you to walk, there's so much peace that comes with that. And so I personally have just felt so much peace with him being in this career because it's so clear that it's where he's supposed to be and it's where God has him. And I think knowing that he's doing what he's called to do has just brought so much peace for me when he's working. And not that it hasn't been hard, but there's just a peace that has really um, covered my mind and my heart in the ups and downs of him working as a police officer. So,
Talk about that for a little bit because that's something that Jaimie also shares with women
mm,
is that both when I deployed to Iraq and Korea and then me as a civilian police officer, she always had peace. She always trusted that God was going to protect me. And if something bad happened, that God was going to carry her. Those were kind of her words in that. So maybe talk about just where that peace comes from. I know it's going to be a faith foundation, but just talk about that peace for you.
yeah. I if I back it up a little bit, early on when I got saved, I felt like God was calling me to make a pretty big decision. I was very new in the faith and I was actually engaged to someone else. And I felt like God was calling me to step out of that relationship, call off that engagement. And um, so I did. And that was the first time that I felt that indescribable peace of God. And I will say, ever since then, that's how God has led me with his peace. And if I don't have peace, it's usually because I'm off some, like I'm not where I'm supposed to be in some area. So peace has always been, um, for me, something, even if I feel called to do something that maybe I don't want to do, or something that's hard, or something that's challenging, or there's, yeah, just resistance, like not wanting to do something, knowing that his peace follows the obedience has just been the greatest gift. And so for Davin being in law enforcement, it was a lot of, oh, is this right? I don't know if this is right. Let's step out and see if it's right. We'll see if doors open. And so we kind of went through the hiring process, application process, interview process, and just doors open, but we had peace. And I think it's that knowing that God has my husband, and whether he's working in law enforcement, working as a pastor, working a desk job, like just knowing that God has his life in his hands. And I think just the reality of we could all get hurt, pass away, be killed at any time, whether it's in sickness or a car accident, crossing the road. And I think there's like, I've just had such peace in knowing that no matter the career, like his life is in God's hands.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and it's not to say there aren't moments of fear or worry. There's been some times where it's like, oh, I haven't heard from him. He normally gets back to me. Like there's been times like that where my mind goes to like, oh, what if?
Yeah.
Um, but I think even in that, um, the Lord continues to just comfort and strengthen and bring peace. And I think it's like what Jaimie said, like worst case scenario, if something were to happen, like I just know that God is with me and he will never forsake me. And it would be the most awful, devastating thing. But I would know that he would be with me walking through that and that we would have community. So um yeah, I feel like that was a really long-winded.
That was a really good answer.
Okay.
There's depth in what you just described there, both in your faith and then also in our humanity. You acknowledged, yeah, sometimes I'm concerned, right?
Mhm.
Like, here's the problem that sometimes we do, I think, specifically as Christians, is we talk about the highlights. It's kind of like social media. We go over the highlight reel, and we don't talk about the reality. No, I am concerned sometimes. And you know what? I think God's okay with that. When a father comes to Jesus in the New Testament and says, if you can, heal my son, if I can, do you not believe? Well, help. I do believe, but help me with my unbelief, right? Just acknowledging that God doesn't respond to us with scorn when some of our humanity pops through, right? When some of our flesh of God, I'm concerned right now. And instead, he embraces us in those moments and gives us comfort. And I really, for me, that has been hearing other people share perspectives like you just shared is what makes me feel like, okay, I'm normal then, right? And seeing those perspectives in scripture and seeing how God has responded to his people gives me comfort and makes me realize that God is a loving God and that
Mhm.
this whole Christian walk is exactly that. I got to put one foot in front of the other day after day, right? It's I'm never going to arrive this side of heaven. It just is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really good. I think there's definitely within the Christian community, sometimes there's this an idea that you have to like, and the Bible says so, like to have faith and to have great faith and to trust in him. And I think and we talk a lot about this a lot at our church, there's a both and. It doesn't have to be like you're full of faith and then that's it. You don't acknowledge your feelings or your fears. There's a both and that you can be like, God, I'm scared. And this is really hard. And this is really painful. And help me to trust you. And I think even in that help me to trust you, you're saying, I trust you.
Yeah. Otherwise, I
Saying,
wouldn't be asking.
exactly. And so I think I think all areas of my life, whether it's been parenting or a marriage, law enforcement, have been that balance of, I don't even know if balance is the right word, but it's yes, God, I trust you. I don't see it, I don't feel it. And I think sometimes our feelings come after. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we have to take the step of obedience or say, okay, yes, God, like I trust you. And then the feelings, or maybe the the processing and maybe healing comes after. But yeah, I feel like it's important to acknowledge that it's hard,
Yes.
um, but also to acknowledge that God is faithful and that He's leading and that He will never leave you. So um, I think there's beauty in being able to do both of those things at the same time.
Yeah. And you kind of tripped over the word balance there. And I know, especially within the Christian faith, I've heard it used before. And the tough thing with that is it almost sounds like you're trying to balance out God. So I like where you went with that with and. Both things can be
Mhm.
present, right? I mean, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane experienced anxiety, calling out to God, right?
Yeah.
So as God here on earth, he experienced anxiety and emotion. And it's okay to experience those emotions. And what did he do with it? He called out to his heavenly Father,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, and I have to point out that you've been very classy for, in a nonchalant way, correcting me on your husband's name, Davin, not Davin. So
Oh, dot.
thank you for being classy. You've now done that 3 times, where you've intentionally inserted that in appropriate times to correct me and make me not feel stupid
What?
for saying it wrong at the beginning.
Oh, well, I will say here's a fun story about my husband. His legal name is David.
Okay.
And so he was given the name Davin at birth. It was butchered all the time. Everyone says it Davin or Davin. Um, Davin, Davin, they all sorts of names. So finally, when he turned 18, he changed it to David to simplify things
Okay.
because even our last name is pronounced Hwang, but
Oh,
everyone says Wang.
yeah, totally. That's what I said at the beginning. I'm learning
So he
here.
was
The
So
importance
yes.
of doing a pre-interview with your guests, folks.
um yeah, but he has just one of those names that's a little difficult to pronounce.
Well,
So you're not the only one.
if any of your friends are still listening at this point in the podcast, I'm sure they want to punch me in the face after butchering names and whatnot. But thank you for the grace, ladies and gentlemen. What we're going to continue here because we got a lot of great things to talk about. Hey, one thing I did want to ask Diane, especially since you guys were married before Davin, I want to show that off a little bit, started being a police officer. Have you seen a change? And it doesn't even have to be like a drastic change, like a bad change necessarily, but just have you seen a change in Davin since becoming a cop?
Yes.
And what's that change?
Yes. I think, there's the aspect of being exposed to a lot of very difficult things and a lot of people that lie all the time. And I think just the nature of the job has impacted him. And it's it's almost like what we were just talking about. It's impacted him negatively, but there's been opportunity for it to impact him positively
Yes.
as well. And I think it's all about how we approach it and handle it. And I think with anything hard and anything painful, it's what we do with it. Because I think no matter whether it's police work, everyone faces pain and hardship
Yes.
and struggle. And yes, there's an added layer in law enforcement. I'm not going to try and make that seem less than it is. But at the end of the day, we all do. And it's kind of like, okay, what do we do with this? Because we can either try and brush it under the rug and hide it and stuff it, or we can kind of be like, okay, let's wrestle through this and walk through this and process and grow. And so I think with Dobbin, there's definitely been the typical struggles of being in law enforcement and how that impacts him. Like, I will say he's never loved crowds, like even before law enforcement, but now even more so. It's just too stressful for him.
Right.
So there's a lot of just like crowd stuff that we just don't do. Um, but I think, over the course of the last 5.5 years, and I will say we're 5.5 years in. So I feel like we're in the middle of really learning. We're kind of at that point where it's not new anymore. We're 5.5 years in, and we're kind of in the middle of figuring out like, oh, what does it look like to talk through some of these tough calls? What does it look like to improve our communication? What does it look like? And I think a lot of times, hopefully, you can talk to people that are 15, 20 years down, and they can be like, we're not on the other side and not from we have arrived, but man, that we learned how to do this.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're still in that learning phase. Um, and it's been great. But yeah, he's definitely changed, and the dynamics of our family have changed. And our I will say even like our days off and work nights. He works day shift. So he has to get to bed earlier. So there's even been a certain element of we try and protect our time a little bit more before he is in law enforcement. If we're out late on a work night, no big deal. We'll kind of work our way through it, the next day, extra coffee or whatever. But really trying to like find ways to kind of guard and protect time and his health and his wellness and ours as a family. But yeah, there's definitely been changes. I will say, we when he got into law enforcement, we really made the decision to kind of dive fully into the community. And I think just even being intentional about who we were surrounded by. Um, so I do feel like we walked into it with people that could speak to what law enforcement life was like in a healthy way. And not to say that we have it all together and haven't had struggles, but it's made such a difference to have people in our life that are, 10 years ahead, 15 years ahead,
Absolutely.
that have wisdom and experience and can really speak to our marriage and to him as a person. Um, that's made a big, I think it just laid a better foundation for us starting, um, and has helped us to be able to process the changes in him, um, maybe healthier than if we didn't have people that could really speak into our life. So,
Yeah. I heard you just talk about a whole lot of things. So I heard about boundaries,
mhm.
the necessity of boundaries. I heard about sleep hygiene, recognizing that in a lot of professions, if you're operating on a day of 5 hours of sleep with lots of coffee, there's probably not a lot of consequence that's going to come of it. You might lose your cool on a coworker. You might you might be a little bit slower in work, but as a police officer driving a fast car and having a gun on your hip and having to make life and death decisions, there's a greater consequence. So we need to get great sleep to prepare ourselves to do the job. I love what you were saying there about mentors. Having, whether you call them mentors, whether they're friends, it doesn't matter. Finding people that are at least a season ahead of us in life and listening and finding people that we trust enough to where if they look at us and say, you're a knucklehead, you need to start doing this or you need to stop doing that, that we're going to pause and go, wow, I didn't want to hear that. But tell me more, right? And we have to have those people. Well, actually, we don't have to. We don't have to have those people in our lives. We cannot have those people in our lives and we can just keep plugging along. And the times that I've done that, I experience more negative consequence. And I still learn the lesson, but I learn it from my own failures, my own mistakes, versus getting the opportunity to learn from other people's wisdom. Yeah. What is there anything more? I mean, those are really great general categories. Is there anything specific that you guys do to connect with each other to improve communication? Because I heard you also talking about those aspects as well. Is there any tools that are more specific that other first responder families would be able to hear and go, "Ooh, I'm going to try that."
Yeah, so we walked through a season where I was actually the one struggling with a lot. It was just a heavy season, and emotionally and mentally, I was not in a good space.
Yeah.
And through that, my husband, I used to love working out. I used to love exercising. I used to be really involved in the fitness industry. And after having kids and life is full, it just kind of took a back burner. And we were walking through this, difficult season and with me, um, and my husband, and in the most gentle, loving way, and I received it that way, was like, hey, why don't you join the gym? And because we have a Peloton, so I love moving my body and it helped a lot. But there was something about I'm homeschooling, so I'm with the kids homeschooling. With a lot of our nonprofit work, the kids are with me. So then I was working out at home, the kids were with me, and so it was more so they were always there, and which is such a gift. But I learned, and he really heard from God on this, and like she needs time away
Yeah.
from the home to really exercise, move her body, and it wasn't at all about the physical aspect of me, but much more like mental and emotional. And I learned I really needed that permission from him of like, okay, when I get home from work, I'm going to take over the kids and do dinner and everything with them, and you go to the gym. And around that same time, he started shifting his schedule and that he was working out. We live 10 minutes away from his precinct. So he doesn't have like a long commute to decompress or anything. So around the same time, he started working out directly after shift at the police department. So he gets a workout in, he comes home, I'm released to go to the gym and get my workout in.
Yeah.
And I will say that very like simple, practical piece of him getting time to just release and move his body and exercise and me to do the same has made such a big difference with us. It has been like night and day. And we just started this probably last April or May. So, um, I think that's one piece. I think sometimes when your husband is gone all day, the thought of them taking even extra time after shift to go work out is like, "Oh, you've been gone all day." Um, but I really found that even if it was 30, 45 minutes, that really didn't make that much of an impact on me
Yeah.
at home, but it made a huge impact on him. And
Yes.
it gave him, especially with young kids and working day shift, it was different. He was working swing shifts when he was in training, and he could come home to a quiet house and, kids were asleep and he could have time to kind of decompress. But working day shift, no matter the day you have, you're walking into a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, 7-year-old, 5-year-old, daddy, and I want to do this. And can you do this? Can you help me with that? And the house is busy. It's dinner time. So, um, I will say finding what has worked for him to help him give him even just a little bit of margin, um, has made such a big difference. And then me being able to do the same.
Yeah.
So that's like, it's just a routine we have on his work days now that he gets his workout in, I get my workout in, and that's made a really big difference. And yeah, I think the important thing about that is we have to both be willing to serve one another in that way. You
Yeah.
know, I
I love what you said there about having that conversation, though. You felt like you needed permission from him. And I'm telling you, as the first responder, I need permission from my wife in that too, because I feel guilty otherwise. I feel like I've been gone for the last 8, 10, 12 hours, however long the shift is, right? And so for me to stay an extra half hour, 45 minutes, I feel guilty. And unless I have the conversation with my wife and she says, "Oh, babe, do that. Yes, I want you to clear your mind, show up more prepared to be the dad that you want to be."
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think for both of us, it's like, okay, we're at that place where we know, like, and there's still times that he'll text, like, if he knows I've had like a long day with the kids, he'll like, hey, is it okay if I work out after shift? Like, he'll kind of check in. And if it's for some reason been just a long, like, day on my end, he'll skip it. But
Yeah.
honestly, even him just taking the time and saying, hey, is it okay if I still do this? I'm like, yeah, thanks for in a way checking in to make sure I was good. So we're both kind of in this, we have the communication open to be like, can I still do this? Am I good to work out? And yes. And I think that yes, and that release in a sort of yes, you can go. And just gives that peace of mind. Cause like you said, I felt guilty because I was like, man, he worked all day and he's going to come home and I'm just going to leave and he's going to be doing dinner time and all the things. I felt bad about that.
Yeah.
Um, but we came to an understanding where no, this is best for both of us. And I think, and I already touched on it a little bit, but on the days where maybe we just have a lot going on and it's hard, like being okay letting the person know. And it doesn't happen very often, but there's been times where he's had a really long day and so maybe I skip the gym that night,
Yeah.
but maybe do something else, whether it's a quick walk with our dog outside or same for him. um yeah, just communicating what we need, and I think it's a constant process of learning or being aware of what we need.
Yeah.
Because I think that our needs change based on the season
Yeah.
and what refreshes us. I think we're learning a lot about what actually makes us feel better. Because I can think it's, oh, sitting on the couch with some ice cream, watching my favorite show, like that can feel like rest, but is it actually restful and refreshing? And I think for us to be able to really learn what that looks like in the season to actually like what actually refreshes us and helps us. So in this season, it's been yeah, a lot of the gym for both of us, which is great. So
The takeaway there, I think, for listeners and for me, is that we have to keep leaning into this conversations, that this communication with our spouse. That I think communication is maybe the topic that there's more books on than anything else. Well, why do people keep writing books on it? Well, it's because it's still something that we don't do really well. There's things that go unsaid. There's perceptions. There's guilt. There's all kinds of different things, and the only way we're going to get to the root of it, and like you said, figure out what's actually going to be good for you and your spouse, is by having safe conversation. My wife's told me that she didn't always feel safe to have conversation with me. She wasn't sure how I was going to respond to something she wanted to bring up, which breaks my heart, but that's on me. Like I was not responding well sometimes. Now she's also learned of maybe when we have those kind of conversations, right? After a really, really stressful day, is that the time that you talk about some really big financial decision that you guys maybe don't agree on? Probably not. Like we want to be well rested for that conversation. And so just that constant process of constantly being in conversation with our spouse, carving out the time for that conversation, right? Like for us, especially when we had young children, we needed to have the kids tucked into bed sometimes if we were going to have great conversation about some decision that we needed to make together. Uh, but I think a lot of us just go along not really getting to the root of some of these things with our spouse. Yeah.
yeah,
The other
I
thing,
think
go ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to say I think that leads into another thing we do of trying to be consistent, and we haven't been the best at this, of date nights and time away, which can be, for us, it hasn't been as difficult because he's day shift. There's a little, we can go on evening dates and we have family close by, which I know isn't the case for everyone, but we've tried to be consistent with date nights. And then, like our anniversary, I grew up with parents who went away, just the two of them, to Cannon Beach
Yes.
every single year. No, like that was what they did. And so I grew up with an example of parents that went away even when we were young. No, they always made that time for each other. And so I will say that's helped us a lot to at least once a year, we shoot for even more often. Even if it's just a night or two, like getting that time away, which honestly, it takes a lot of like being intentional, putting it on the calendar, coordinating care of the kids. And it's looked different in different seasons. I mean, for a while, it was like, okay, one night away at the city next to us just to have some time away. And as the kids have gotten older, we've been able to kind of extend that and take, time away together. But I think there's importance in carving out time each day and figuring out what that looks like and time each week. And then, if you can fit in a date day, once a month or, and just being intentional about carving out time because otherwise life gets full. And if you're not intentional, other things are going to kind of take over your schedule.
Well, we end
So,
up just co-parenting, right? We stop being husband and wife and we start being business partners is what it turns into if we're not intentional about dating each other.
yeah. And we've had conversations where we've slid into that. And I think that's like it all comes back to communication. It's like being able to sit and say, I feel like we've kind of slid into being like roommates right now. Like we haven't really been intentional about connecting and conversation. And I think sometimes we think like an amazing marriage is you'll just never get there. which would be amazing. But I think a great marriage is when you do get there, are you guys talking through it and getting yourselves back to where you're dating one another and pursuing one another?
Yes.
Because it's like we talked about, there's always going to be hard times and valleys, and a lot of times it's what you do with it and your next steps once you realize you're there. Um, yeah, so for us, we've definitely had the high seasons, the mountaintops and the valleys, and I think seasons of complacency and I would even say maybe just like laziness in our marriage and just not putting a lot of time and effort in. And, you know, thankfully, um, when we've been in those places, I really feel like it's been God that's just kind of been like, okay, let's wrestle through this a little bit, talk through this a little bit, and kind of shake things up. And with that, we've been able to address how we feel and improve and grow. And that's marriage, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Hey, let's get into the nonprofit, the Blue Hero Project. Where did this idea come out of? And if you could tell the listeners, what's it all about?
yes, I love this. So actually, a friend of mine, she is a police wife here in the greater Seattle area. And back in 2021, she went on her social media and was raising money to bring snacks and drinks to some police departments in her area. And I remember I looked at her post and, she had info to donate to her. But at the end of it, she said, or instead of donating to me, you could do something like this in your own area. And I was like, I can maybe do that. Like post something on my social media, maybe raise money for, I was thinking kind of one Seattle precinct was kind of on my mind. And so I remember talking to my husband and being like, babe, I think I'm gonna try this. Like, I think I'm gonna see if I can raise some money and we can buy some snacks. We had done something similar with our church in 2020. Um, and so I did. So I posted, and I remember telling my husband, because coming out of 2020, I mean, it was a hard, especially in the Seattle area, just a hard time for law enforcement. And I was like, babe, I don't know if anyone's going to donate. Like, I don't know if any donations are going to come in. So I'll put it out there. But if we get no donations, we'll pitch in. I'll see if my parents can pitch in and my sister, my brother, and we'll just pull money together. Um, and literally thousands of dollars came in the first week. And so we were blown away. And it was like, okay, we were going to do one precinct, one department. And now, okay, let's do maybe 10. So we shifted. At that time, it was still going to be kind of a one-time project. We were going to do all the Seattle precincts. They have 5. And then we were going to do 5 other local departments. And I remember we started, at the time, we called them drop-offs because we were kind of dropping off goodies. And I remember I called a girlfriend of mine after one of the Seattle ones. And I was like, I just love this. It is like fulfilling. I'm just filled with excitement. I just love it. I don't want it to end. And she said, well, maybe you should pray about turning it into a nonprofit. And I was like, I immediately felt like there's no way I could do that. I stay at home mom, no background in nonprofit, anything. But that kind of nudge from her started our process of really just talking about that and praying through that. And once we kind of felt peace and a green light from God, really, we said, okay, let's give it a go and see what happens. So we came up with the name Blue Hero Project and decided we would visit 2 to 3 agencies a month and bring snacks and drinks. And yeah, so from there, it became a nonprofit. We registered with the state of Washington in 2021. And then in 2022, we became a 501c3 nonprofit, which was super exciting. And yeah, so it's kind of very organically grown and changed in some ways. Like even when I think language is important, and we initially were like, oh, we're doing drop-offs, and now we really call them visits, because our heart is that we would be able to be there to visit and connect, with the officers, with the support staff. Um, and yeah, so that was 2021, and we have visited, we've done probably, haven't calculated recently. It's probably around 130 agency visits that we've done. A lot of those have been revisits. So when we look at like the number of agencies we visited, it's been about, I think last I checked, like 55 agencies. Um, we've really had this kind of desire to go deeper and not wider, at least in this season, and really just felt, as much as we would love, and we truly would love to visit every single agency, we have just felt in the season of like really the desire to build relationships. And so we kind of, we're just slowly working through a list of agencies in the area, and also being able to work in revisits so that we can continue to build relationships with the agencies. And then we did a visit with Seattle PD's Mounted Patrol Unit. So a lot of people don't know that Seattle PD has a Mounted Patrol Unit. They patrol on horses, and they do a lot of community engagement, and they have a barn. And so we did a visit there just to show them support and appreciation. And out of that, their sergeant at the time said, hey, it would be really fun to like bring law enforcement families and have a day where all the law enforcement kids can meet the horses, and it's a private space. It's not open to the public. So there's some privacy there, which is great. And so that idea kind of came to life I think last November was our first family event. And so that has been a huge blessing and such a joy, because we've loved meeting the families
Yeah.
that are at home and supporting their officer, and being able to extend that support and appreciation to the spouse and to the kids. Um, so that has been a lot of fun. We've hosted, I think this last Sunday was our eighth event out there, and it's free, and families can come out. We set up snacks, and we did a barbecue in September. So that's been another aspect of how we serve that has kind of organically come to be. And we've also had the opportunity to send DoorDash gift cards to families when the officer has been involved in an officer involved shooting, or has been maybe shot and injured on duty. And for us, that's just been a very simple, tangible way to let the family know that we're thinking of them and support them and praying for them. So yeah, so those are kind of the three ways that we serve, and it's really just showing support and appreciation. And um, yeah, we've been able to partner with an amazing nonprofit called Bibles for LEO, based out of Massachusetts, and he makes law enforcement Bible outreach kits. And so we have one church that has consistently given so that we can purchase these. And then we just bring them with us to visits for any of the officers that want to take one. And they're really, I feel like I know if you're listening, you can't. Oh, here we go.
But for the YouTube watchers, you're
Yeah,
going
for
to
the YouTube. So they look like this. They're really
Oh, that's
awesome.
awesome. That's really
And
cool.
yeah, the kits, and they have a Bible in them, a challenge coin, stickers. And David, who started this, he is an officer himself and a chaplain, and works out of Massachusetts. So that's just been another aspect. And we've had some amazing churches and people partner with us so that we can purchase them and just be able to give them wherever we go. but yeah, it's been a lot of fun. My husband is like incredible because a lot of like Monday night we went out to Seattle PD, and so a lot of times Dobbin's spending his days off or pockets of time on his days off, helping with visits, connecting with other officers, and our kids are usually in tow. They've probably been to 95% of the visits. So that's been a whole nother aspect of it just for me personally and as a mom, and learning what it's like to involve our kids and teach our kids about serving others. And yeah, it's been a huge blessing. And I think, we've just been amazed by the people we've met.
Yeah.
I think the nonprofit work and the programs and the events and everything are amazing. But when we look back and think of all the people we've met and the families we've met, and we've just been blown away by how amazing of a community it is. And I wish the whole world could see how amazing, all these men and women are. And yeah, it's just been amazing. So
I remember you sharing with me in Bellevue that you have caught a nickname from some of the agencies.
a nickname?
A nickname, yes. What do they call you when you're coming around doing these visits?
Oh, like the snack lady?
The snack lady. That's exactly where I was going. I love, oh, the snack lady's here. Oh, good. I love the snacks, right?
Oh, yeah, the snacks, it's so funny because it's such like, and I there's two parts. It's such a simple thing. And I think it's it's something I probably never would have thought of doing because it's so simple, right? But I think with that, it's just a tangible way to say thank you. And in a way that doesn't disrupt their day too much. They can grab stuff and go. But food, whether it's home cooked meals or prepackaged snacks, food communicates often love and support. And so for us, that's yeah, that's been how we communicate our support primarily is through snacks, a wagon of snacks. So
Well, we didn't just have one family in the Tri-Cities, but throughout 2020, 2021, even maybe a little bit into 2022, the Tri-City community was remarkable
mm,
about bringing some type of snack by the different police departments and just saying thank you. And sometimes it was a single family, sometimes it was a church organization or a business, and sometimes I didn't even want the snack, but it still made me feel good. Seeing the love, seeing the support that we had from our community, it lifted my spirits and it carried me through tough days, tough weeks, and tough months. So I know for a fact from my own experience, the work that you guys are doing with the Blue Hero Project is making a difference. It's making an impact on officers' lives, and it's actually making a difference on our community's lives because now we have police officers going out in a better spirit to provide service to the community. So keep up the work. Hey, if this is the first time anyone's ever heard about the Blue Hero Project or maybe heard of you, Diane, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
yeah, we have a website, so blueheroproject.org, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram under the Blue Hero Project. So there's another Blue Hero Project in Australia that's like a reusable water bottle company or
Oh,
something.
okay.
So that's not us, but there is the Blue Hero Project on Instagram and Facebook, and our website has those links as well. But we would love to connect with you. It's been really fun. Social media, I have a love hate relationship with social media. But I will say so much of our work and our organization has grown organically through word of mouth, through social media, and we've been able to connect with so many people through social media. So we love being able to meet people there, with the hopes that we can meet people in person at some point after. So
I love it. Well, for the listeners, look down in the show notes, the links for the Blue Hero Project will be down there. Diane, time is my greatest commodity. I can't make more of this stuff. And you have given me an awful lot of yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat and hear about Blue Hero Project. And we just appreciate you and Jaimie and your investment into others in the first responder community, other marriages, relationships, people. Thank you. I think it takes courage and obedience to use your hardship and your pain to serve others and to help others and to encourage others. And it's not the easy choice all the time. But you guys have made that decision to use your story and your hardship to serve and help others. So I just want to thank you for all the seeds that you're sowing into other people's lives. You'll probably never know the full fruit of your guys' obedience and the seeds that you're sowing, but keep it up. And we appreciate you guys.
You're welcome. Thank you for those words. Have a great day.
You too.
Wow, ladies and gentlemen, what did you think of Diane's perspective? I loved hearing about her faith and how that is a foundation of her life and how that has carried her through this. But I also loved her man, she was real. She sat there and said, yes, I have this foundation of faith. And I also am concerned sometimes. There's times that small voice in me is like, but is there something wrong? He hasn't sent you a text. He hasn't called you in a while. And I think that is a very normal thought and a very normal feeling for first responders or our spouses to have. Hey, Jaimie and I want to make this better, folks. We'd love to hear from you. There's a few different ways for you to communicate back to us. First and foremost, please follow us on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. That will cause the next episode to come up in your dashboard. Also, you can rate and review us on Spotify and Apple. There's 5 stars waiting on our main page. We'd really appreciate a 5-star rating if we've earned 5 stars, folks. If not, keep your stars. Instead, shoot me an email at chris@gravityct.com. Let us know how to make a better future Marriage Monday topics or guests for me to interview. Folks, we only get to live this life once. Let's go out and take care of our families and the people in our tribe. Take care of each other. God bless.